Last Thursday, that's in the European Parliament in Strasbourg, some MPs had debates about the language in Tibet. But I was on the train back to Brussels, so I missed it. So can you give me a brief about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, there was a resolution by the European Parliament on the teaching of the Tibetan language in Tibet. And it was provoked by something that made it into the news in the Western media, which was a comment by the Communist Party official in Qinghai province, which borders on Tibet, called Chiang Wei. And he said that Mandarin should be taught in all Tibetan schools and should be the focus language in Tibetan schools. Textbooks should be in Mandarin, and this is where the focus should be. At the moment, the policy of teaching in Tibet is bilingualism, so that is to teach in Tibetan and Mandarin.
Is he comments personally as an individual comment or as an official comment?
It's not very clear.
On behalf
it's not very clear, but it was presented in the Western media as being, well, it's the only comment on the issue that people have heard. So they have seized it and they're assuming that it's true. And so anyone in the parliament who is interested in human rights or issues about China was obviously very interested in this. The other thing is that after these comments, there were student protests in Qinghai, and even on a university campus in Beijing, on a campus which was especially for minority groups, who there would have been Tibetans and Uyghurs, and there were student protests about, well, in favour of keeping the Tibetan language and not letting the Tibetan language die in Tibet. So they had also responded to this comment by Chiang Wei. And so on Thursday evening in the European Parliament, there was a debate on this resolution to try and encourage Tibetan language to be kept strong in Tibet.
Is the resolution addressed to the Chinese government?
Yes, and you've watched the debate. What did you think about it?
Well, like always, this is always the same debate. I mean, some MEPs will pronounce their opinion without knowing the current situation. I mean, we are not sure of this we're not sure of this information sources, etc. But what is interesting is that I have seen MEP. I think you've seen the video too. MEP who's called
Reinhardt.
Yeah, actually, he was the only person who has said that, well, that is not so rational to have this kind of resolution.
Why?
For that. Well, that is internal policy in China, and we're not too sure of the situation.
Yeah.
And so maybe it is not so appropriate to have this resolution in Strasbourg in the Parliament
when we don't know all the facts.
So
because he
are you saying that this resolution has been adopted before the Chinese government's announcement of its policy on Tibet?
Yeah, well, we don't know if the Chinese government will make an announcement, but certainly it's been made before we actually know what the policy is. Because, as you say, this is just one person's comment. And the reason that Mr. Reinhardt was not happy with the debate or with the resolution was because he had the letter written by the Chinese ambassador to the EU a couple of days before the debate, outlining what the Beijing government's policy is, which is bilingualism, and that there's been no change to that. And so he had this in one hand and Chiang Wei's comment in the other hand. Obviously they're different, and he's saying, well, we don't know which is correct. So how can we make a resolution when we actually don't know the facts? We don't know which is correct.
So this gentleman probably will be punished by the central government.
Punished.
Why?
But as
look. if you say something
Yeah.
to the public as an individual person, some people just pick it up and try to make it a fuss in the European Parliament and go to the Parliament to pass this silly resolution, which the resolution on something which is perhaps going to be happened in the future, but we are not sure. So this is so ridiculous.
Actually, well, I regard it. I see it in this way. Well, Tibet issue. This is turned into a parliament tradition. I mean, so not once upon a time. I mean, maybe several times in a year, where the parliament will do something for Tibet issue. So that is very natural for me, and to see parliament adopt once again a resolution on this internal policy of China.
Yeah,
It was
but-
an excuse. to
Yeah,
make
it
a-
is.
It was the excuse. Well, but
pretext.
yeah, but apart from this, I was trying to ask you that is there a gap between the central government and the local governments in China?
Yeah, sure. That is what we could see from this time. I mean, we just have every MEP in the parliament has received a letter from the Chinese ambassador to European Union outlining the fact. I mean, the central government's policy. But what we see from this report in the European media is that, well, this guy from the local government wanted to promote Mandarin in the schools in Qinghai province, I think. It's so obvious that we could see a gap from the central government's policy and the local government's policy. But what is more interesting is that we should follow up maybe the punishment from the attitude from the central government towards this gap.
Yeah. I mean, in this instance, this one comment from one man, because of his position as a Communist Party official, has caused, large student riots. I mean, some reports had, thousands and tens and thousands of students demonstrating. And obviously it's caused a political reaction over here. So it's had a huge, huge impact. One small comment has had a huge impact. So, yeah, if I was a Communist Party member, I'd be pretty angry because, it's very bad publicity, but it's also had a physical effect.
So in my view, that's the Chinese Communist Party should have their own new discipline, just to discipline their party members to behave correctly.
Well, put it this way, there should be some kind of incentive for them to behave correctly. I mean, if this Chiang Wei is unhappy with the current policy, he needs to discuss it with lots of people first before he says it publicly.
Yeah, but however...
Or to change the way of the Chinese government, the way of public communication, I mean. We don't know the context where this political leader has said that.
Yeah, and
Maybe
we don't even
just-
know if it's an accurate translation, actually,
Yeah, that's why I call it ridiculous. How can this happen? In the EU member states, where we believe that we have the excellent democratic system and we have the excellent election system, but all of the MEPs, I mean, so far we have got 34 MEPs.
6, I think.
Okay, so to represent 499 million population in Europe, I mean, how can we make the mistake to choose some people who even don't have a brain and just heard something, some really stupid comment, and then make a big resolution in the European Parliament? Can you imagine this?
It's like
Yeah,
we were
this
saying
is-
before, it's an emotional and emotive issue. So even the most intelligent, rational people can put their rationality aside if they feel very emotional about something. And with this issue, Chiang Wei's comments were almost like a confirmation of everybody's worst fear. It's been a worry in Free Tibet and other organizations for a long time that the Tibetan language might be suppressed. And the last remaining hope was that it would still be taught in schools, because it's a very important issue. Whether a language is taught in schools or not affects whether young people speak it, affects whether, affects the development, everything. And so it was the thing that people were really worried about. People really were scared that the Chinese government might ban Tibetan from schools and just have Mandarin. So one small little piece of information, a hint, as you say, made people go,
I should say, yes. I should say that perhaps that's people's sense on Tibet in the European Parliament or in the Western world is so weak, and we cannot hurt it. And people, even just a small little tiny things happen, people feel hurt.
Yeah.
And then people want to rebel.
And the other thing is that, there's 2 points I want to make. The first one is that MEPs have to please their constituents as well. MEPs want to look good. They want to be able to write in their monthly newsletter, I stood up and spoke against the Chinese oppression of the Tibetan language in Tibet. And then all their constituents will go, oh, wow, they're so interested in human rights. So even if an MEP does know a bit more what's going on and perhaps realizes that this isn't necessarily a change in the Chinese government policy, they might stand up and say the same thing anyway because they want to impress their constituents. They're elected officials. They need to be voted in 3 years' time.
So you mean that's actually what some MEPs did during the last session of the Strasbourg plenary? It is on behalf or it is under the willing of their own voters?
They want to please them. And as we've discussed in previous sessions, the general public definitely has a lack of information about what's going on in Tibet, but they have a very strong opinion about it.
Yeah. All the things happened, it seems like, in my view, it's because of the miscommunication between the Chinese government and the Western people.
Or the lack of communication as well, not just miscommunication.
Yeah, so if you are the Chinese government, how will you improve the communication?
You mean between Europe and China, the communication, or the public communication of the Chinese government?
I'm talking about what happened in the European Parliament last week in Strasbourg.
Yeah.
It's about the Tibet, and the reason some MEPs made this stupid thing, because they did this under the willing of their voter, and the reason they did, their voters wanted this kind of things happened because they don't receive any information from the Chinese side, from the Chinese government.
They do. The letter, Chinese ambassador's letter.
But that wasn't public, though. That was an email to the relevant MEPs, and it wasn't published in a newspaper. It wasn't published online. It wasn't actually easy for them to know this information because, to get ordinary people who don't have the time or the energy or the will to really research every topic that they have an opinion on.
That's true.
It needs to be more accessible to them.
Yeah.
Accessible in an appropriate way.
Yeah, of course. You don't want to have any of these issues sensationalized or sort of oversimplified because they're not simple. But you do want them to be available.